Basically, I want to talk about this universal basic income. I had a very interesting debate on Twitter about it and why do I believe it's a bad idea. First of all, we need to differentiate um, the system to be used on the Western world and the system to be used in Africa, in developing countries. I think it's very important to differentiate the two because I think the biggest problem with the basic income is the implementation. It's great to talk about this basic income, and we can say whatever we want to say. Nobody knows really what the outcome could be if implemented. But all I know is the biggest problem with new ideas and new concept, especially on this bigger of a scale, is the implementation. Where the money come from? And I know there've been statistic. I was a link was shared to me about some of those questions. But of course, they're just a bunch of formula and numbers that was plugged in, but nobody really have data on a large scale to say, hey, listen, we've done it in this big of a country, um, the whole country. This is what happened. This is the case study and all those things. Some of the testing has been done on a very small scale, but I don't want to knock it out. But before I get started on the detail, and that's my opinion. But before I get started, and people say, well, what do you know about basic income? Where are you? First of all, basic income is the notion that is the solution to give cash to the poor to pay their basic need to fight against poverty. Well, that's great. But what expertise do I have in that space? Well, that's exactly the space I'm in. We developed a technology and a business model to fight poverty. And our approach is very simple. Micro entrepreneurship, where you train, you monitor, but you also bring the solution uh, to those individuals that you train and monitor that will help them generate revenue. And in our case is what we call a solar kiosk. So we developed a model where, you know, people can generate revenue on charging phones, selling services, government services, providing Wi-Fi connectivity, and they generate revenue on all those services that they provide from our kiosk. And all those services are negotiated from us, so they don't have to go and talk to all those big companies. We do that, and we've had some success. But in no shape or form, I believe that's the only solution. I believe fighting poverty will require different solution for different needs. Now you have extreme poverty, you have, basic poverty. So those are different areas. Plus my what I've seen in those areas is the mindset issue. Business, micro businesses is not for everybody. You have to have a certain mindset to run a business, even on a micro level. You have to want to. It's based on your work ethics. It's based on basically your effort. You don't work, you don't eat. And that's not everybody's cup of tea, I should say. So we will need different solution, but basic income, um, it's a possibility. Why not? My issue is who's going to implement this. I always go with the premises of sustainability. If the program is not sustainable, and don't tell me on paper, because I wrote business plan in my life, and they always look great on paper. I never seen a business plan that lose money. Never seen one. I never wrote one that lose money. You always write a business plan, or you always write something that will go, just go up as a business. So when I read those articles about, oh, the money will come here if we lower the case that on spending on this, then we'll have this much, and then no, it's great on paper, but we already know, human being, we irrational. We don't we don't use practical thinking. We do irrational thing. You have corruption between the layer. You have uh, different things. Then who gets what? What's the requirement? how you monitor those things, and all that costs money, and to say then what happened when they stop. Have we done testing to see that those people actually are able to sustain themselves if the program gets shut down? I always look at basic income as giving money. And my experience in giving money has always been that person always has to come back to get that money. And that's why you see a lot of begging. A lot of those things are not sustainable. Sometimes you give, sometimes you don't, but it's just not sustainable. Now, whether we study if that money will be used for the right reason, I'm not going to argue with that. There's been studies, there's been other studies. I don't, it doesn't matter to me. That's not the important part for me. The important part is how sustainable this thing will be. Because when it stops, that person, can that person, that individual, man or woman, will be able to sustain after that or go back to the poverty level? And why do we have a bottom up, I mean, a top to bottom approach to fight poverty? That's also something I've seen that is a bad type of approach, because a lot of time there's a lot of layer from the top that has to get all the way to the bottom. And there's been studies, because people love studies, but we've seen with AIDS for the last foreign aids or financial aids, we've seen in the last few decades how useless, literally useless those aids are. You know, they're giving to the government, and we all know that money does not trickle down. So how can we develop? I don't want to knock down basic income. That's not my goal. If this solution can be implemented and it works, man, more power. Because ultimately, we need to solve this poverty problem. And it's not about my solution against you. No, no, no. That's not the case. So let's go with the premises that this solution has potential. Now, the implementation has to be done otherwise, you know. And I'm open to see what are the comments and all, but we need to understand something. We need to look at what happened previously with donors' money and all those things before we start saying, well, government will implement this, will distribute that money and all this thing and make it a right. Because we know when we involve humans at any layer of society, there is going to be issue. So we need to minimize the different layer, minimize that layer. Now with technology, it can be done. Mobile money. I've seen some of a company called Giving Giving Aid or something like this, that bringing basic income in Africa, and they're raising money, crazy money actually, to test and collect data and see. But of course, if you give someone money, it will allow that person, to, if they use the money properly. I definitely agree. If I get money where I didn't have before, I can pay the school fees, the basic needs, so I don't have to stress so much about those things. That's great. That's perfect. But that money has to come from somewhere. And for Africa, it's already a challenge. Do we raise tax? You know, we talk about the rich paying for the poor. Yes, and I've seen this link. Scott actually, the debate I had was a gentleman called Scott, created a very interesting website with all those different questions. But to me, those questions are hypothetical. It has not been tested on a full scale, so it has to be done. But me personally, basic income is not the solution, because what you're teaching that individual receiving the money is dependency. It's been proven. Foreign aid was the biggest tool of foreign aid, was making those government dependent of that money. And it's been proven. That's why government now are moving away from financial aid and all those things, and creating sustainability, creating businesses from the ground up, creating jobs and all those things so they can collect more taxes and all those things. It has to be a cycle, a sustainable cycle created to make a sustainable economy. So do I believe that fighting poverty is not a great cause? Absolutely not. That's why ultimately that's what I'm fighting for. I dedicated the rest of my life for that fight, and I've used a certain type of model to do that. Do I believe that there's more models that need to be created to fight poverty? Absolutely. You know, but we need to be rational. We need to understand that, if you're going to give money to someone, that money has to come from somewhere. And that money has to come on a consistent basis. And that money has to be, sustainable to be able to come. Until that is solved, I don't see that approach working. Second is, this top to bottom approach will not work. I think it has to be a community based solution, including technology. And of course, we have to have a strong monitoring, which can be done. And I think has been done lately. But, and having a VC approach to raise the money and all those things, I don't know. I can't speak on it because I'm not sure how that's going to work on a full scale. But as far as I know, that's not the actual approach I would take. But I'm open to opinion. Obviously, this video is not to change people's opinion, it's to engage a conversation. So please, remember what I'm saying. I'm not trying to change your opinion about yes or no for basic income. I'm just trying to engage a conversation. And I would love to see a much bigger data collection on that idea. Thanks.